Welcome to the Flow of Money podcast.
This is where high performance meets financial intelligence. In these discussions, we combine the performance science of flow and flow states with practical wealth management strategies.
The intent is to build a resource for those who believe that high performance mental states can impact wealth and abundance in all its forms so that you can make the impact you want in the time that you have.
Let's get started.
My name is John O'Day, and I'm a financial advisor. My love is cash flow. I truly love the cash flow generated by businesses for the positive impact that this cash flow can have on the owners, their employees, and their broader community. And this cash flow is never more important than when the owners of these businesses start to execute their exit and succession plan. I just love it all and can't wait to help.
I'm Dave Gieselman, flow state coach, breathwork facilitator, and former chef turned high performance nerd. I help leaders and creatives build clarity, confidence, and capacity, teaching the science of staying cool under pressure so you can think clearly and execute fast, especially when things go sideways. As a person who works with people in various states of financial abundance, is there like a trend in people's physical health, people who pay attention to their physical health and people who pay attention to their financial health? Like, is there of course it's not going to be like always going to have crossover, but does it trend one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think, let me just talk out loud for a second, my reaction to the question, because I'm not sure I can pick out trends, but I could certainly, meaning changes over the last 10 years. But I do think it is very common that wealth creators will often overemphasize the wealth side of their wellness to the detriment of the physical part of their wellness. Overwork or stress or eat, all of the things required to overachieve, right? And we talk about bringing resources from the future into today. Corporations do that. Individuals do that, right? If you're trying to get 16 hours of work done over one day rather than two, right? You're bringing that resource into today. It requires some stimulative effect. It's very hard to do that over long periods of time. This is where burnout comes in and things like that. So, if you look at a cross-section of people who have enjoyed a great deal of financial success, typically in the wealth creation space, so not inherited, not a lot of winners, unique aspects of it, there's a narrow range that are, and then compare that population, right? Here's 100 people who are worth $10 million of value that they've created by starting a company, being uniquely talented in their space, whatever it is, right? So they're in the top 1% of 1% from a wealth perspective, and they've created it. When you look at their financial wellness, the question is their financial wellness materially different than the general population, right? And the general population, I don't know if you looked around, the general population is really unhealthy, right? And it has nothing to do, by and large, with, goals. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. So, when I step back and think about that, is it statistically different, the health consequences of the overachievers from a wealth standpoint? I do think that if we tease it apart, we did our double-blind study and we statistically studied, there's an interesting mix where I think there are things that people are on the path for creating wealth. Maybe they're not there yet today. There's a period of time where their physical health takes a hit, right? Lack of sleep, stress, cortisol, and the stimulation required to maintain that level of energy towards, an outcome for a long enough period of time. This is where burnout comes in, caffeine, alcohol, all of this, you experience this in your day job, right? As part of those processes. What do people use as tools to get through those stressful times? None of them are healthy and sustainable over long periods of time. But at some point, some of this does start to shift, right? So if you look at actuarial tables, there are certain insurance carriers that give you a premium discount on life insurance if you are wealthier.
Sure.
Right. And part of that has to do with, if you are wealthier, you tend to have better access to healthcare. You tend to go see the doctor because you have the resources to go see the doctor. You have medical insurance. You have you know, generally speaking, you find that there's an above average level of education, right? There's things that come with I'm wealthier, and there's therefore a healthier set of outcomes that happen. So I do think at some point it does shift, where some of the longevity things show up when you have access to resources. And then for some, I do think that there is a subpopulation of that group. I mean, I'm thinking about take every construction CEO, it's still old fat white guys for a reason.
Right.
Right. It is old fat white guys, right? And that's not necessarily a healthy population. But there are wealth creators where their goals and energy towards accomplishing things does creep into other areas. Like, I want to be physically fit. I want to be capable. I want to have some of these things. And with resources come some of their opportunities to do it.
Right.
So, I think there's an ebb and flow there. It'd be interesting to see somebody study the math, but that's
right. I think about, sort of like leaning into to like the manosphere, right? The sort of right wing, weird and the Goggins of the world, right? The David Goggins and make sure we're recording this. Yeah. Fuck David Goggins.
don't do that, man. I loved his books.
Right. So
He's back, isn't he?
I don't know. But the idea that you can do all of the things, right? This idea that you can do, I can crush
if you
wealth
just
creation.
if you just worked hard enough, everything would happen for you.
Right. If I could,
So if
I could
if
crush
it's not
my
happening,
business.
it's not happening for you. You're not working hard enough.
Right. Crush my business, crush my physical health, have the healthiest relationship known to man, be an amazing father who is like uniquely devoted his time and energy and attention to his kids. Like, you don't get to have all of those, right? You don't get to be, you don't get to be in the gym, 2 hours a day, 4 days a week or more.
Right. You're stacking, right? It's 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, because you're doing legs and chest same day. So you can do abs and back the next day, right? So you can work 5 days a week and get to your 10,000 pull-ups. So yeah, I do think that in that culture of, it comes up to some degree, and it's sometimes hard to tease apart, but the patient shaming, right? If you're not accomplishing the physical goals that you have for yourself, it's because you're not working hard enough, right? This is a you problem. And I think that's unfair, right? I think there is a capacity challenge that you and I talk about in terms of total hours in the day allocated the priorities that you lay out. I was telling my wife the other day, I need fewer hobbies, right? Because there's things that I want to do that have dollar signs attached to them, and I just run out of money. Like,
Right.
I can't do them all. And then there's time, right? I want to study a certain thing. I want to get my knowledge and capability in a certain area to a degree. I want to, and I got to sleep, right? I got to eat. I got to poop. There's things I got to do. So I do think that there are maybe sprint areas or things that, people can think through. This is where the productivity of flow states really got me excited and connected to your offering was, could you be more productive per ounce of effort if you're leveraging some of these things together, especially in those knowledge worker windows?
Sure.
If you're doing squats, it's, I'm not sure my flow state is going to get me more squats done in the same minute. But if I'm producing an article, or I'm solving a client problem, or if I'm being productive on behalf of my peers or my suppliers or my customers, that hour of work, I don't think there's any question anymore in working with you that an hour of work can produce more value if I'm leveraging the technology and science behind flow triggers, right? And so can I make that piece more productive?
Well, and I also think it's interesting to talk about where the sacrifice is, right? Because you can't, and exactly what you said, right? I need fewer hobbies, or I need to this. Yeah, flow state can make you more productive. Like, drop in and you get super productive, but there's an energetic cost. You get more productive. Yeah, so your output per unit of input goes up. Cool. But that means that when you get home, there's less.
Right.
And I think looking at budgeting time, money, energy level, like budgeting time, energy, output, even leveraging flow state, because we use this, and then comparing that to the same sort of budgeting practices. Yeah, there are certain things where if you drop some money into this thing, it will grow way faster.
Right.
Right? It will grow way faster. And you do that by pulling resources from other areas where you are now not, resourced in sort of more fluid areas or liquid areas or safe areas. And so
There's periods of time. There's a couple of ways to get back to what you said, make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. But there's a couple of ways where fragility can creep into your model. So, for example, if you trash your body long enough to be productive from a business perspective, the model's more fragile, right? You get sick. Right now, you can't be productive at work because you just can't even function, right? So do you scrape resources from the future into today to be more productive? Comes with a risk and a cost and fragility, right? And the trade-offs associated with it, right? There's not always a clean answer. And then to get back to some of your point, while flow states can make you more productive, I'm not sure it eliminates well, let me ask this question. Let's say I could get, in a non-flow state oriented 2-hour work block, I could get 100 units done. But with flow state, I could get those 100 units done in an hour work block, right? I'm more productive, right? Is the recovery required the same? Because I got 100 units of work done, I still need 100 units of recovery, whether I get it done in an hour or 2 hours. Is the recovery required the same?
If you do it in flow, the recovery required is way higher. Because you're burning energy at a way higher rate.
Interesting.
So we could take 5-pound dumbbells, right, and play 45 minutes of 5-pound dumbbells,
right,
and kind of go to exhaustion, kind of go to whatever.
I call them under smart bells because I don't want them to feel bad, but I understand what you're talking about.
Or we could pick up 85-pound dumbbells.
Right. Do it 5 times.
And do it 5 times
and be done.
And fail on that 5th. Right. Absolutely fail on that 5th. Like that was it. 4.5 was actually like what you had in you, what your muscles, what you had in them. Right. Because, and on 3, they're starting to tear. Right. You're starting to get the damage. You're doing the damage that is going to cause
you're going to maximum reps where technique is preserved, right? But you're failing, right? Tissues are tearing. We're creating the damage. Whether it's 45 minutes at 5 pounds or 3 minutes at 80 pounds, right? There's some formula that we should get one of our favorite workout experts on, like percentage of 1 rep max, right? There's probably a calculation that they could tell you, yeah, if your 1 rep max is 100, you could do 1,000 at 20 pounds, or you could do 5 at 90 pounds, 90% of your 1 rep max, and you'd get the same sort of, what do they call it, delayed onset muscle soreness, right? The muscle soreness that comes as a component of recovery is the same.
So the point is, though, that if you do that 85 pounds, 4.5 rep, 85 pounds, the energy output is way higher, right? The recovery is way higher, right? The growth from doing that is way higher. The output is way higher. The outcome is way higher, but there is a cost to it in the next 2 days as to how much you're going to be able to use your arms.
Right.
Right.
And I think there's lots of science around the recovery is the more important piece.
It's absolutely the most important piece. The sleep, the breath, the relaxation, all of the
fluids and fuel and rest and long enough, right? The concerns. As we heard, the reference to your, the Goggins, right? There are no rest days, right? In that model of effort, right? Rest days are for sissies kind of thing, right? And I'm not sure that plays out in the science. Like, I think you can get more productive faster with resting, correctly designed rest. And then not only are you not working as hard and as long, you can be more productive in other areas, right? You can be productive longer. less risk of injury. Like, I think there's the rest process is a key component of this.
Right. But Goggins is also not building a $100 million company while he's running ultramarathons.
Right.
He is capitalizing on his asset, which is, by the way, depreciating by the day.
He's getting older.
Right. And so he's capitalizing on something really valuable,
Right.
but he's not building his brand. His value is not growing by the day right now. Right. Because he's not.
And I think when we're looking for those places, you and I, to have this multiplier effect, right? To have the multiplier effect and to bring those multiplier effects into as many areas as you can, to again experience as much abundance or flow as you can possibly wring from this time here on the planet. Where do we get those multiplier effects in a military context? Surprise is a force multiplier, right? If you have 10 people, with surprise, the effect of their effort is magnified, right? It's force multiplier. The pace with which an organization can operate can be a force multiplier. So where are your force multipliers? Flow triggers, entering flow states can be a force multiplier. And then what can you stack on top of that, right? So are there things, we talk about this in a business context, for a lot of wealth creators, for most wealth creators, time is the most precious resource.
For sure.
And so the question is, at some point they run out of time to do all the things required to create wealth in their business, right? Marketing, business development, sales, operations, servicing clients, finding new ones, list whatever it is that every business needs to, complete. Find new people, make them happy, find some new ones, make them happy, whatever that loop is. One of the force multipliers can be in the process of delivering your service, whatever it is. I'm caring for my boss, or I'm providing financial advice, or I'm treating patients, or whatever it is, a service deliverable that you're hired to deliver. I'm building a building. Can the delivery of your service in and of itself produce new clients? If new clients is a time block that you have to allocate and you're running out of time and you have to deliver your service, can you deliver your service in such a way where that in and of itself becomes its own marketing process? Client referrals, and people are proud of the outcome that you've created, and they go, well, who did that? I want some of that. So that becomes, to some degree, its own force multiplier, right? Well, what are those things that we can mine, And I think this is where, some of that magic of flow really, right, is you can use the triggers that we've talked about in the past, right? The more triggers that you can apply to build the magic of those those bouts of work, right? Those segments of work, clear goals, the skills gap, the focus, right? Carefully designed. But I think you're bringing up an important point, which is the rest and recovery.
Right. And you just don't get to do all of it at the same time, right? And I think we lose that. I think we lose track of that, right? So if to use that example, which is, I think is a great one, like I'm a contractor, and my force multiplier that I'm going to use to get more clients is I'm just going to hang the name of my business on the fence in front of this building or house that I'm building.
Right. Everybody's seen that.
And everybody sees it and they're like, wow, that's the thing. But at the same time, because I'm doing that, all of my focus, so all of the flow triggers, like all of the things are going into building this house. I am not at the same time like marketing the shit out of this process. I am my name is simply on the fence, right next to the thing. I have to sacrifice, because flow comes with sacrifice. It is flow follows focus, and focus means that we start getting rid of absolutely everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got that power of no, right? The power of whittling down to the core piece, right? In terms of, flow follows focus. Focus is enhanced by a narrowing. Right? This is, and to get back, right, for many individuals who their product is a service, right, it's them, and there's lots of things that they could do, right? Take an attorney, right? You pass the bar. There's lots of things you could do with your new legal authority to practice law in the state of California. And there's a temptation to say, so take MySpace, right? Competitors in MySpace deliver services, and they will describe themselves comprehensive, fiduciary, financial planning, wealth management. My specialty is business owners, executives, and high net worth individuals and families. The problem with that is it's not a specialization, right? That's just generically describing I work with anybody who has a heartbeat. So it's not super helpful to focus and to say no to some things, right? To be, and the fear associated with the focusing process, right? Around things that you're choosing to give up and the loss associated with the things that you're choosing to give up, and the grief or the worry, if I'm too focused, do I lose out, or is there a loss of value creation, and being, talk about the process of, narrowing your focus, right? Because that's a friction point or an obstacle point for a bunch of your clients, I'm sure.
Right. It's really funny because the moment we focus, like really sharply focus, our ability to catapult ourselves within that niche goes up dramatically. I have a guy that I'm associated with, Mike Bell. He is a realtor. He only works with sellers and only works in residential, which narrows his focus.
Already a narrowing.
But like single party, no double title, anything, like clean, clear, and he's 0.01% of realtors in the country right now. He works in Pasadena. He is a phenomenal guy. And all he does is represent sellers. Like he doesn't do both sides of the thing. He doesn't, like, all of these things I watch as he says no to a bunch of things and has skyrocketed to the top of his field. I happened to see him today. I happened to be, listening to him today, and just like, and I watch people fear narrowing their niche too far. And then I look at where all the flow triggers are, and the flow triggers are in completely narrow spot. We look at surfing, we look at all these things. The line you have to take to get into that wave from where you begin, depending on where it is, there's a single line with a couple inches of wiggle room that are going to put you in the barrel of a wave as a surfer. And anything outside of that, like, you miss. But the value of spending time in that barrel, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of the things that flow state is going to do, including help you not mind the 100 waves you didn't catch today. Right. The value of hitting that sharp, defined niche, that sharp, defined flow state, right? That place where, no, this is all I do. And it's all I care about. And yes, could I do more? Sure. I do this crazy well. The people I do it for really appreciate it and tell other people who need this thing. And I think there's Sam Walton is the only guy who ever got rich on We Got Good Prices. Like, he's it, right? Like, it's a list of one.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, and I think, back to the wellness question, right? The sometimes, subcontext, the underlying message around success in any endeavor is that it has to hurt, right? That, a lot of this effort, if you're not enjoying success, you're not pushing hard enough. And you push till it hurts, and then a little more. And as the recipient of that feedback, that can be super challenging. Like, when does that actually stop? Because the human body has an incredible capacity to work beyond, and will work to a great degree if you ask it to, right? And you put demands on the physical chassis, physical, mental, emotional chassis of your system. It can. And the more stress you put on it, the more stress you can, right? You get comfortable at that size range and that process. And so part of this negative, if you're not enjoying success, maybe you're not pushing hard enough because it's supposed to hurt. And at what point does that turn into, something more productive rather than destructive?
Also, when does it become abusive? And I certainly know that my parents were boomers, and I grew up with that. Like, if you're not suffering, you're not, then you're not earning it, right? If there isn't a certain amount of sacrifice, if there isn't a certain amount of suffering, then it's too easy. You should be doing more. You should be whatever, and I go back to the statement, look, I got my ass beat by my father, every day. If you think that other people should suffer because you suffered and you turned out okay, rest assured you didn't turn out okay. Right. But if you think that other people should
Just because you said that out loud is probably a clue.
Right. That I'm fine. And so it reminds me of my exit from professional kitchens, shortly after Charlie Trotter died in his own restaurant, and of undoubtedly some stress related condition. And I and many other people in my profession just began going, yeah, no, I could continue to work the rest of my life. I could put in these hours. I could put in this stress of life, go crazy, open my own place, right? And at one point I had to ask, to what end? Like, when does a chef get to enjoy the fruits of his labor? When do I get to put it down and go, man, I sure built something that is going to enable me to enjoy raising my son, being with my wife, seeing this world that I've been busy feeding all of this time, that I have sacrificed. I've sacrificed health, I've sacrificed time, I've sacrificed presence, I've sacrificed, digits, right? Like I have sacrificed all of these things.
Yeah. Yes.
And at what point do I now get to go, all right, I have built a thing that and I think the situation that we get into, where if you're not suffering, you're not paying your dues hard enough, or it just becomes this self-perpetuating thing where I can now never stop.
Right.
Is that the same as needing to grow the financial portfolio? Is that the same as corporate demand for year-over-year growth, regardless of how insane and unsustainable that belief system is? You can grow 13% year over year, and that is the expectation. I am sure that there are people who want to see their investable assets growing year over year, and then get real upset when it doesn't work out.
Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting question, right? As we think through at the individual human being level, right? Where is healthy drive and desire for the work that fills us, right? Balanced by the goals that drive us. And sometimes that's hard to connect, right? The work that we do,
and tough to parse out, right?
Right. Super tough. Right. This same context where we can imagine people using language like, when do you go from caring for something versus it's now an unhealthy enabling process, right? And the drive, I can imagine that there's context where you could describe the mental state and beliefs required to push yourself from a performance standpoint to achieve the highest levels in any field: NBA, MLB, NFL, Olympics, top of the economic food chain from a value standpoint, CEO, publicly traded company, mental states required. So take the interviews with Kobe or some of these high performers, the mental states to drive through the difficulties associated with achieving at that very high level may not necessarily be described as healthy. The sacrifices required, you got to weigh carefully. And where does that sacrifice come? And is it a fair trade-off? Same is true in a collective effort, right? Like a company or an organization. You can look at it at the micro level. right? There are healthy organisms that grow, but that grow can be unhealthy, right? The same is true in a collective organization. Could you argue that there are for-profit entities seeking to grow and meet the demands of their owners and shareholders who are driving the organization to continue to grow, or they're going to sell it or fire you or exit, right? And kill the organism. Thank you so much for doubling in value over the last 5 years. I look forward to seeing you do it again. And doubling was great, but could we triple? What is required of an organization to produce that? Can you get stuck in the drive that growth in and of itself as a goal becomes unhealthy? And what are the markers or assessments that you could layer on top of that to try to flag, hey, we've gone beyond what's healthy and supportable and what will ultimately kill us or our host,
Right.
right?
I think about your golden geese.
Right. So you've got a golden goose, maybe I can stuff it where it pops out 2 eggs, but at what point does it die, right?
So you know what, one of the and I think about this, one of the lowest sort of average mortality ages in as a grouping is professional and semi-professional athletes. As a group, Olympians and professional athletes tend to die 10 to 15 years sooner than average.
We're gonna need that reference in the show notes. That's fascinating.
Right. So we put these. I'll get the actual number, and I talk to other breathworkers who work with professional athletes, and it's these people that we boost and we put on these pedestals as like the paragons of health. Right. This is what ultimate physical human performance looks like, and we look at the Kobe's and the Jordans and the Mark Spitzes and over time, right? And this particular group of people typically has a far shorter life. The bodybuilders, all of them, far short. I don't know if you've seen Mark Coleman these days. He looks like shit,
right?
Right?
Right.
He's looking rough. He is looking rough, and enjoyed massive accolades, success. He has my endless respect for what he did with his body and how he built himself and the achievements he's had. I wonder, as he walks around on his crutches, right, in his 50s, I wonder if he still thinks that was worth it.
Right, that was a good trade-off. Right, that he was bringing forward, units of health and overspending them, and to some degree in a fashion that he may not get back, and he may not. And I think it's, I don't know the answer to this question of the mental drive, right? The mental drive for achievement required to push you to get to the very highest levels. Because in my own case, I'm nowhere near the highest levels, but I certainly have pushed myself from an achievement standpoint. And I'm pretty certain that there's internal damage associated with that. Lack of sleep, high levels of stress, the caffeine required, right? The crappy food, right? All the stuff that I did for a long enough period of time. And the question is there back to flow, right? Could I be more productive in a shorter period of time such that I could continue to grow without trashing myself?
And it's funny, you talk about the body, I think about the financial, right? And I think about, is there growth such that in a business, such that it does not create huge damage, right? I think about on a personal level, and this, and I don't mean to start a fight here, and we're almost, certainly gonna, but one of the kind of questions in the zeitgeist right now is, should there be any billionaires?
Right. I think that's a fair question.
Right? Should there be billionaires after $1 billion? I mean, and the meme I read, and I love it, and 900 million, 900,000, 900. Do you just get a trophy that says you won the economy?
Right.
Right.
Hey, congratulations.
And then anything after that goes back into the systems that enabled you to build what you built. That it goes back into the public safety nets or the giant infrastructures that enabled, a dumb schmo like me to build what he Build.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we could go round and around on this. I mean, I think it is, I think we have, my concern is that what used to be true 50 years ago, let's say pre-internet age, information age, right? Whatever we're going to call this cycle of as we head into artificial intelligence age, whatever we're going to call it. Prior to that, in the industrial era, there was a fairly predictable cycle of boom and bust, right? Where, I haven't gone back through the economic literature in a while, but I remember learning this story of, the innovator's dilemma, right? That as you are successful and more successful in a domain, it can become true that you lose the capability of servicing the unprofitable part of your marketplace. You cede that to somebody else because to grow profitably, you need to dominate the larger, more complicated, more profitable part of your marketplace. And in that seeding of the low end part of your marketplace, you in effect create the fertile ground for the creation of the next organism that's going to kill you.
Right.
So that as you focus on the growth associated with satisfying the more and more complicated, more and more valuable problems that your clients have, you are no longer able to solve the simpler, easier ones because it almost loses money to solve those problems, right? And so, there were varied examples such as, earth movers, right? Earth movers long enough ago, when you were a tractor and you dug holes in the ground, the cutting edge technology was having wires connected to the bucket, right? And the wires pulled the bucket. And the biggest earth movers on the planet still follow some of that technology. Like if you're going to dig a 1,000-foot trench, it's still probably a wired based system, but it's somewhere along the way, the hydraulics were created. Right, where it's not a wire, there's a pressure-based hydraulic system that turns the thing. Safer, easier to manage.
Lower maintenance.
Lower maintenance, all sorts of positive stuff. And when it was invented, it was laughed at, right? It couldn't dig a 5-inch hole, right? And so the large-scale earth movers said, at it. Like, if you want to sell to the local contractor who's digging trenches around a house for, $500, awesome. I'll send my clients to you, right? I'm getting out. And eventually the technology improves to the point where you're up here on this trajectory and this little, hydraulic system grows in capability and sophistication and eats your lunch. And so, that was almost a healthy process, right? Where the growers would grow to a point where their process would get turned by this newer organization that would come in underneath. Steel industry, right? Large process coal-fired steel plants are producing at scale to solve the biggest problems. Rebar, nobody wants to make, right? Because it's cheap, it's low margin. And so mini mills, these electric-fired mills, started to crop up to satisfy this little niche and now is a much more productive, right? So lots of industries have this, and I think can be part of the productive process, right?
Sure.
We have this in flow states, right? It's the same process that I think about when we talk about the skills gap, right? As we master our domain, we got to find that next puzzle that will take us to the next level of the skills gap challenge. That's a sort of nested S loop. We grow to a point where our novelty starts to wear off and we need to start something new soon enough so that when that levels off, we've got something to replace.
Right. The triple backflip in snowboarding. Right. So nobody could do, and nobody could do, and nobody could do, and nobody could do. And then as soon as somebody did it, 5 more people did it that week. Yep. Right. The 4-minute mile, the human beings couldn't seem to break. And then the moment that we broke it, like it was, 40 people followed behind and okay.
My concern that, from a business context, is a long-winded way to get to my concern. My concern is, have we entered a phase where in the information age or artificial intelligence age or electronic age or whatever we're going to talk about, there is so much more value now at scale that you no longer have the ability for the next competitor competing service or process to eat the lunch of the incumbent. So, for example, Amazon, if you wanted to launch a retail store today, I don't think you can, right? The shopping, so is there a concern that this normal process is shifted and the normal drives that wealth creators can pursue that drives the world forward, some advantage to providing economic incentive on the part of somebody to solve a problem, that economic incentive will get people to solve all sorts of problems, right? Efficiencies and improvements and new solutions and new ideas and concepts. And, now it can certainly get misapplied where you could argue in the drug space, the only drugs that get solved are the ones that are valuable and not necessarily the ones that are needed. Right. This definitely can get misconstrued. But my concern is the only opportunities in the future for wealth creation won't be at this entrepreneurial stage. Nobody's going to invent a replacement for Amazon, it feels like. So then the only thing that is driving people forward is not creation, value creation for a problem that is no longer getting addressed, right? Which is where the person goes from 0 to 10 million and lots of value gets created for a lot of different people. Now the only value creation that is left is to go from $1 billion to $2 billion. And the motivation that drives that person to go from $1 billion to $2 billion is very different, right? Than the motivation to drive somebody to go from 0 to 10 million. So are we entering a space where the incentives are different to the degree that it becomes a toxic process? And there's all sorts of worrying data. If you can work hard and get a good job and still can't live a life that feels reasonable, you start to sow a very challenging picture moving forward, right? Where 3 haves and 3 billion have-nots doesn't work.
Right. Which is its own self-limiting problem, right? So there, France found the upper limit of this, a couple of centuries ago. Like they, right? They experienced that. Like when that the separation between the haves and have-nots gets wide enough and gets disparate enough, all of a sudden, there is what do they call it in finance? A market correction?
Yes, there's a surprising shift of understanding and assumptions. And this might be an interesting conversation for somebody who studied the data better. It's tempting to believe that an economic realignment took place at that time and that nation states and wealth creators eventually get reset to some degree, right? In terms of Egypt isn't Egypt anymore, right? That the pharaohs aren't pharaohs anymore. That hierarchy in France, how much was that reset? For a very small number of people, it was reset a lot. Or that next 99% to 90%, was it really reset a lot? Or is that who actually came out on the other side to run and operate the country? You have to have people who understand what's going on from an economic value standpoint. And then do you just end up creating a new set of a smaller number of haves? I will tell you that it does feel like, last time I looked at the data, the number of haves is rapidly accelerating to a very small number. I do think that is true. I do think that my impression in the number of haves in relationship to have-nots in terms of the concentrations of wealth has exacerbated to the point of absurdity. And so is this now something different? Has it always been true that there have been haves and have-nots, and does that give me permission to let it go? Maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's, that to your point, vesting control, allowing control of that kind of size wealth in such a few number of human beings is problematic from an incentive and motivation standpoint. And I don't know how to.
But also feels self-limiting, right? Like
Right.
And we look at the physical, right? We look at, so these groups, these bodies, these organizations, organisms, whatever, right? Have figured out how to utilize flow, how to figure out how to utilize all of the tools of focus, the tools of force multiplying, of all of these things.
All of them.
And
caffeine to stimulants to flow state, whatever the tool is that we're going to apply.
Right. To autonomous bot armies, right? Doing whatever. So we can look at these things in any way, but just like, and I said Mark Coleman earlier, I meant Ronnie Coleman, the bodybuilder, right? Ronnie Coleman, who did the same thing with his self. He did the same, and he became like the hugest, biggest, most dominant version of himself that he could possibly have been. You know, check out pictures of like Barry Bonds today, right? And you see the same thing. At one moment, you know, he was like this hugely dominant baseball player, right? Ronnie Coleman was this hugely dominant bodybuilder. Andre the Giant was this hugely dominant wrestler. We look at all of these people, no different than the organizations that we're talking about, the Amazons, like the one in the universe version of these things. And their ability to continue to grow was not unlimited. And their ability to remain dominant forever was not unlimited. And most of them, and if I was a bet man, and I don't know where it would end, but I would expect a organism like Amazon to at some point just go through a massive rupturing. It hits
implosion, cataclysmic fracture, right? Some sort of internally and externally based, because reconstruction process, right?
Because what it's doing cannot grow exponentially forever. Like there's nothing, it just doesn't, nothing works.
Well, I think it's the challenge I think we as humans have is it's hard to see and it's easy to know, right? I mean, the universe is a creative place with expansion and contraction, right? The process of creation, death, and that cycle, right? Everything is temporary and transitory. And so we can understand that on one side, and then we apply it to something like an Amazon or an Apple or some of these for-profit entities that are pursuing growth for its own end to benefit the shareholders, which is part of how that cycle works. Where does that fracture break down? And how does it get applied, and where does it come up from a process standpoint? Because it always seems in the middle of the process like it could never happen. So you have this confidence that it can never happen, and this knowingness that it seems like in cycles it is bound to happen, right? It's nearly certain that growth unchecked over a long enough period of time is the seed of its own destruction.
100%.
And is there innovations getting applied that can take that growth cycle out longer or take the flywheel out longer? I think there's opportunities in terms of management science that you could, right? There are organizations, Dunbar number, right? The Dunbar number was referenced. I don't even know if it in reality applies anymore, but this is the idea that we as human beings can probably build connection and community with no more than about 150 people. Right? That's the maximum outside edge of what a community can build. Because beyond that, you can't build a relationship and remember them and know them and have a connection with them.
Your brain's not wired for it. Your brain is not constructed for that. Check.
You don't have the capacity for it beyond that. So organizations found, and there's business studies around, that when the organization gets to 150 people, they split themselves in two, right? So that they could continue to grow, right? So you might have two manufacturing plants rather than one big, huge one. Each one has its own community and continues to grow. Now, the entire organization owns both. Could you leverage, situations like that where you scale positively these smaller communities in such a way that it grows forever and becomes a flywheel? Now I'm back to maybe there's innovations to stretch it out in a fascinating way, but I still have this knowingness that growth at some degree becomes its own disease.
Well, growth is a terrible goal. Growth for the sake of growth is a terrible goal. And we see other organizations that growth for the sake of growth isn't the goal. And the one I will point to, we've looked at Costco, we've looked at Amazon, and I would juxtapose Costco, right? That has not focused on growth for the sake of growth, right? Pays its people extremely well, has huge retention,
sure,
unheard of retention. You have almost never encountered a grumpy employee at Costco. It happens so rare,
sure,
by and large, right? And I look at that as like a healthy human, right?
Sure.
Who has yes, we have priorities. Yes, we want to do certain things. And yes, this is how we're gonna go about doing it. I'm gonna hit the gym 4 days a week. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not, overspending financially here, energetically here. I'm not taking on too many calories over here. I'm making sure that I'm getting enough rest, right? And I'm doing all of these things, and I see, to use like giant monoliths as a proxy. I think we can use Costco as an example of a healthy human with a healthy sort of sense of growth and what is required to maintain that. I have to be good to I have to be good to the organs, right? I cannot grow at the expense of the organs. I cannot grow at the expense of the mitochondria. I cannot grow at the expense of my blood cells.
Right. I know. I think you bring up a good point, right? In terms of in any, community, right? When we have an imbalance of this mismatch, right? That the reality is that some of the members of the community that don't jump on board with the growth goal to compete at that level, they don't survive long enough to win the stability and sane process, right? That there's a weeding out process that this growth. So you have an organism that grows all out, and you have healthy organisms that are growing slowly. Eventually, the growth one kills the healthy ones, right? Despite the fact that they're sane and stable, it is a rare organism that is able to fight back over a long enough period of time to survive, watch it die, and be left to survive on the other side, right? Same is true in companies, right? If there were 100 retail-oriented organisms, right, companies, and 3 of them chose to grow all out. Of the remaining 7 out of the 10, I'm not sure the rest survive with a healthier process, right? It can be that your peers in that context, their unhealthy behavior crowds you out to a degree that your healthier behavior doesn't survive. And I don't know the answer to that question, but that's one of my curiosities about this process is so you can see this play out in a lot of different instances. So take my role, right? If I'm hired by people who have wealth and abundance or the desire for wealth and abundance, and they want coaching and support to do that better, and let's just say that's some of the context of the service that I deliver. At what point beyond which there are no individual human beings with wealth and abundance that need help because they've been supplanted and replaced by technology-based solutions, right? And so, yes, we've created a great deal of wealth, to your point, for a small concentration of owners, but like Amazon makes money because people buy stuff. So if Amazon no longer needs employees because the packages get delivered by, robots and flying cars, and I got a transporter in my house, and it just materializes 3D prints in my house, right? Automatically, I get a steak 3D printed in my house through proteins, right? And I've replaced 10 workers, right? Then all of a sudden, who can afford to buy the steak? I don't know.
So once again, once you've replaced everybody you once employed,
yes,
with technology or robots or whatever, all of the people that you just employed now can no longer afford to buy from you.
Correct.
And by the way, they were, I think that understanding that there is limitation. Once the top 5 companies no longer have any employees, right?
It's a problem.
Right, that's a problem because all the people they employed and the trickle down. Now nobody's got any money to support their thing anymore.
Could you take, for example, this is with Chang, I'm going to blank on the guy's name, former Yahoo founder, ran for president briefly, was one of the advocates of this idea of universal basic income.
Yep.
Could you take, to your point, the wealth that you enjoy beyond a certain threshold, we're just going to take it and we're going to redistribute it at a basic level so that everybody has enough. I don't care if you work. I don't care if you jump up and down. I don't care what it is. In Alaska, if you live in Alaska and you qualify, you get the check, right? You get the oil dividend check. right? If you're a human being, if you have a heartbeat, you're going to get a universal basic income check of X amount. Pick a number, $50,000. Everybody's just going to get it. And if you are lucky enough that you get to work beyond that, awesome, knock yourself out. So everybody's going to get 50 grand, right? Such that we are on an unsustainable course from a value creation standpoint, that it doesn't matter if we can get to a point where the human beings are no longer required to produce value for human beings. That breaks down. If you can design and manufacture an iPhone to sell to me for $3,000, and now it costs you $30 rather than $1,000 because you don't have humans involved, I still can't afford to buy it because all the people that used to be employed by Apple were my clients. If they don't hire me, I can't afford it. So all of a sudden, the cascading negative effect associated with that, is an example of the growth beyond, as we've talked about, stripping the future resources and then back to, at a very personal level, both at the personal level and the organism level or the organization level or the company level. I think there's probably a similar way to look at how do you build a resilient set of goals and execute them in such a fashion such that it becomes a positive, virtuous cycle of support and growth, right? That it is a healthier work bout, recovery bout, community-based process where your clues around financial wellness, physical wellness, spiritual, emotional, right? All of the different wellnesses, what are the markers associated with a healthy path so that you're pointing your flow state at a positive result?
Are you suggesting that perhaps living a life based in intentionality, right, with the understanding that you can only have so much, right? Like I can only sock away so many nuts into a tree, right? Before they rot before I ever get to them.
Right.
And so going, okay, what really is my goal, right? What really is my goal? And understand that the growth is a shit goal. Like growth for the sake of growth is a shit. So that what, right? So that, and when I work with people and we talk about their goals and we don't talk about goals for very long. What we talk about is so that you can do what? So that you can have what? So that I can retire at 35. So that at 35, I can follow late spring, early summer, bouncing between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn and
chase the wave.
Right. Chase the wave, just follow the warm blue water around the globe or whatever. That's my dream, right? Like that's what I want to do. Or
sandal tan.
Yeah, my perpetual sandal tan, which is what I want. So for those listening, my goal in life is that if I always have a sandal tan, then I am living the life that I want to be living. I want to live a life such that I always have a sandal tan. That is the marker of a quality life well lived to me. And so what is living a life of intention? Physical intention, taking care of the machine that's got to do the work, right? Taking care of the machine that's got to do the work, taking care of the body that's got to do the work, the brain that's got to work, so that you can move out into the world and create that value so that I can then what? And part of a life of intention is, and enough is, and knowing where enough is. Where's enough? How big, how yoked, what's the body fat percentage? What's the size? What's the goal? What do I want to be able to do with that? Right? My personal sort of physical goals are, I want my body to be able to do anything I want to do. Right? I don't have Everest hiking, climbing goals. I would like to be still doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu well into my 60s. And
Right.
so I want a body that does that, right? I want to bind. So I need to maintain flexibility. I need to maintain
muscle mass,
all
bone
these
density,
things.
right? All the things to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible from a capability standpoint.
To do the things that are important to me.
Longevity, right?
Right.
Health multiplied longevity. I don't want to live to 100 and be incapable of doing anything from 90 on.
Oh, no, I have a deal with my wife, and the line right? The line in the sand is wiping my own ass, right?
Ah,
And for me, that like there's the quality of life issue, right? Like there it is. And the day that that is no longer mine, burlap sack puppy lake, I'm kind of done, right? And then
sure,
I go
sure.
to a death with dignity state, right? Because I think like so many things, yeah, I may be able to push my longevity up north of three figures, but quality of life is far more important to me, right? The quality of the life that I'm living. We can push businesses up into the billions and have we broken a trillion yet? I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And as soon as one broke it, five more did, right?
Yep, exactly.
But for what? Right? For what? And is being valued as being a billionaire, which is by the way the fastest growing demographic in America is billionaires, right?
Yes.
The fastest growing demographic in America is billionaires.
The hardest 100 million, Dave, is the first 100 million.
Well, that's what they say, right? That's what they say. I have enjoyed every minute of earning my first 100 million. But yeah, so creating a life that is not based on
I don't think this
ridiculous,
is a new.
unreachable goals.
I don't think this is a new challenge, right?
Right.
I mean, this is a historical problem, right? This is, as we talk about other models that people apply. How do you frame this process such that the decision making is easier, right? You've got, philosophers and religious context, and
Sure.
we certainly talk about the Stoics, right? In terms of, what is your ethic required to organize your goals and your mindset and your framing? And I do think we apply some amount of what got us here, from fur-based knuckle draggers to like running computers, right? Give it whatever it is, 250,000 years. Right, whatever the number, a million years. But that trend, part of what I think uniquely separates us, and there's other organisms that have that, but is the sense of community, right? The ability to work collaboratively in a fashion generates excess value, right? Such that, to your point, I'm able to produce 100 nuts. I really can reasonably expect to eat 50 of them before they go bad. That excess value I get to trade with the person who grew or who has access to 100 gallons of water and can't reasonably consume any more than 50. Now, both of us have everything we need. Doing it then for the support of the community and in collaboration and moving the whole community forward such that we are collectively stronger and safer and more resilient
and healthier and happier and have opportunities that extend beyond the gathering of resources.
Right. And I think there's an interesting, so this can get applied in a bunch of different areas. This is where some of just brief review of, I want to choose, I'm 22, right? And I want to choose between a corporate path that produces value versus a nonprofit path that has an impact. And which is actually economically more valuable for the community that I'm interested in impacting. So let's say I can live a life where my expenses are capped at the lifestyle you would experience by being an impact-oriented individual. You go to work for a nonprofit, you're paid pennies because the nonprofit can't afford, but you have a positive impact on your community versus you pursue an economic path, but you freeze your lifestyle at the same level. Which has more potential for value, right? So if I can make $250,000 a year as an attorney or a banker or, some sort of corporate, service provider, but I can freeze my lifestyle at $80,000 a year, that excess value over a long enough period of time might be more impactful than going to work for the nonprofit. Right, in terms of measuring the lives affected by the value I created. And so then is growth for growth's sake? Is it growth for the impact that you can have? For some organizations, the growth is based on the impact that they have on their clients, but it can be misapplied, right?
Sure.
It can, or misconstrued. Like I have this problem all the time. Is my goal really to improve the positive impact on the lives of my clients, or is it for the stuff that I end up owning that makes me feel more important?
Right.
More capable of producing offspring that I'm supposed to genetically predispose to, like I'm better mate material because I have excess capacity and cars and home, whatever. I struggle at times to capture the fleeting sense of what is really driving me and what's my so that what.
Right. Right. And the real question then comes, if so when you are there, I'm already there, but when you are there and I am no longer questioning what my capacity to reproduce looks like I'm done
Right.
reproducing.
I'm
You'll
done.
get there. I mean, you got a few years ahead of you, bud. But I am all done.
If a human being comes out of the body of my wife, there's several miracles have taken place.
Right. Right.
Several miracles.
Yeah. Yeah. I am no longer interested in not only my ability and my value as an offspring producer, but I'm an empty nester, which means my son is thriving, and if I kick off tomorrow,
You've done your job.
I've done my job, and whether or not I leave him a dime, he will continue to
produce
thrive.
value.
He will continue to produce value.
My question wasn't for me personally, but do I, as I'm genetically constructed, right, with the drives and desires that I've inherited from multiple generations, do my drives and desires emanate, right, that I don't always feel in entirely control of, right? As I'm meditating and stuff comes up and my awareness is hit by thoughts and ideas that I'm not sure I've got any control over where they come up. My job is to just notice. So if I have drives and desires that come up for me and I sort of frame them in a nice and Pollyanna way, this is a positive application of this desire, even though I'm not physically producing offspring anymore, does it still bubble up from the burning insides of my soul to produce excess because I'm still wired as I wasn't supposed to live this long? Do I still have the 14-year-old brain of producing offspring that, I was born with, 100,000 years ago? And the fact that I made it to beyond 50, I wasn't built for that, right? I'm still, craving the peacocking effect associated with pick me as a breeding partner.
Right. Right.
That was more my question, right? Am I reframing in positive language the goals that I have from a growth and abundance standpoint? But it's really so that I can peacock a little bit better. That's a part of my brain that I don't directly have access to. I just have to be present for when the stuff comes up and try to think, all right, can this be productively applied in some fashion where it impacts in a positive way somebody beyond me?
Right.
And I think that's the framing that helps take some of the energy.
And then the question is, do I want to, looking at it from an intentional standpoint, right? I love intention. You're allowed to do anything you want. I don't judge. Do anything you want as long as you do it on purpose, right? Meaning, I want to use that creative value, right? That excess value. I want that to go to the next 8 generations of my offspring.
Sure.
Or do I not care? Fuck the next 7 generations of my offspring. How about if
let's take it out of the money context, right? My capability of doing 3 pull-ups versus 4, like I've got an itch to be able to do more pull-ups.
Mm-hmm.
But at what point have I crossed in the functional from a capability standpoint, your longevity is assured at 1 pull-up? Like, give it up, right? You're going to be fine, right? Nobody else can do pull-ups that, don't try to do 10,000 because that guy's weird.
That guy's super weird.
that is tough. Like, awesome. Way to go. That's fucking beautiful that you produced a chassis that could do 10,000. I'm not sure I'm going to get there, but that interest in just a little more, right? To go from 3 to 4, like like to get to 10, but am I going to get to 10 and wish I could do 11? Like at what point is my desire for just a touch outside of my existing limit? At some point, my body's going to get to the point where it's trying to hold on to 10, and then it's going to be 9 and trying to hold on to 9 because at 60, I'm not going to be pushing for 50 pull-ups, right? Or 70, right?
Right. Well, and that's which brings us full circle. It's what is the cost? What is the cost of the recovery, right? And that's where, because that's where the balance is, right? In all the things is what did you borrow from, right? And it's all about the cost of the recovery, right? And so going back to the very beginning of the conversation, I do 4.5 85-pound, whatever, and now my arms are shit for the next, for the next
3 weeks.
3 weeks or whatever. Yeah. Or do I work those 5-pounders and work the longevity and go slow and do all that and I think that at some point we find this balance where I can push myself this hard and I'm willing to live with the recovery from pushing myself this hard. And I think that recovery aspect, personally, emotionally, mentally, financially, relationally, like we're in constant kind of like that tilt. Was the juice worth the squeeze?
Sure.
Was the in whatever context that we want to put it in, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that
The juice
if
is
we're
always
gonna
worth the squeeze. The juice is always worth the squeeze.
the juice is always worth the squeeze, right? The juice is always worth the squeeze. But this is where intentionally hitting flow states, intentionally hitting growth, intentionally creating businesses that are building and that are building and growing, intentionally hitting those sprints and then intentionally dialing back, right? And I think that there is a healthy way to approach all of these things. You don't get to do all of them at once, right? But you get to, this is what I want to focus on right now. And this is really important to me in this moment. And this is why this is important to me in this moment. So I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to go full flow state on this thing right now so that I then have the space to go full flow state on this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, so what I hear you say as an insight to potentially apply, right, is the expense of the recovery as a metric to gauge the value of the effort, the bout of effort, right?
Sure.
And are you outstripping that process to some degree? Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question that, if we're talking wealth and health and some of that overlap, I do think that there's periods of time that work bouts in a particular domain can take the lead at the expense of others. And, that a well-rounded human or a well-rounded process, I think, is unfair. I think in that flow state trigger of the skills gap challenge, right, is one of the clues that we can't just get to a state and then imagine that we're going to enter in and enjoy the juice at that state without some amount of growth to keep that gap large enough. So there is some tension there in terms of maintaining a large enough gap of challenge without allowing that drive for be really growth, right? And challenge versus growth. And maybe it's novelty, right? The novelty makes for the skills gap challenge.
Yet
right?
another flow trigger, right?
Right. This is where your athletes who are finding domains of flow state in very challenging areas may find that they pursue a new flow trigger oriented hobby, right? They go from skateboarding to BMX to rock climbing to, right, that at some point, the growth that they enjoy in their particular domain outstrips from a recovery standpoint, and the growth that they need in the skills gap challenge, in that domain, the recovery is too big, right? The sacrifice at some point to get to the very pinnacle of bike riding, right? Tour de France, right? And the amount that you might have to potentially trash your system in such a way to bring it forward to perform repeatedly at a high level at that, you might decide, this has been awesome. I've gotten very far. I'm competing in a fashion in a way that I think is sustainable. But from a novelty standpoint, to get to the next level, I'm not sure the expense, from a recovery. I don't know. I mean, applying recovery, but that skills gap challenge is one of those things that has me concerned that at some point to reliably enter back into. So take this further, but imagine the business owner who has run an organization for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and gone through several iterations of their business, right? They survived the dot-com crash and they reinvented their business post the dot-com crash. We've got skills gap challenge. We've got novelty. The business has shifted to some degree. 2007, 2008, crisis delivers the opportunity to recreate a business and survive and new challenges. But at some point, really, the novelty starts to wear off. And, where did they get their flow, right? And what is the novelty offered, and they struggle and flounder, right? Because they've reached the outside edge of their own capability. The transformation required to get to the next level is too intrusive and risky. There's some fatigue and breakdown at that stage. At the entrepreneur who grew and exited and then died because there was nothing on the other side for them from a flow state standpoint, right? And God forbid that their spouse passes, and their spouse was the anchor and connection to the community, right? The young woman goes to work and creates a wonderful business, and she retires and sells the company at 65, and her husband's the connection to the community and the kids and the nonprofits and the friends, and the husband dies and the spouse is there with nothing, right? Community related. There's in that skills gap challenge that triggers as a flow state trigger where we get our juice, like breathing, right? Like oxygen. Does it lead us down this path where we pursue those stretch receptors, right? The stretch experience to novelty? This is the addiction response, right? The novelty triggers that we continue to pursue those novelty experiences such that there isn't enough Jack Daniels in the world anymore. Right?
Or dopamine or likes or comments or engagements, right. Or, yeah.
I don't know if there's an answer to that.
I would say welcome to the human condition, and welcome to the great conversation. Like this is why we have these conversations. I don't know if there's answers. I think it sure is fun to talk about. I think that there are, and every time we think we got a really good bead on what the real answer is, I think we grow beyond that version of ourselves. And so I think that the real answer is grace, right? I think the real answer is understanding, and you nailed it earlier, that the transience of all things is the nature, and really it's going to be forever a moving target. Right. It's not. And the moment you think you got it, tell people the more tightly I cling to being right, the farther from it I likely am.
Yes.
Right. Yep. And understand that the point of life is that it's a moving target. The whole point is to continue to grow and to find the novelty in different places and to really enjoy the journey. Mm-hmm. Right? And really enjoy the journey, because it's not the guy who dies with the most acorns wins, because that guy's still dead. And by the way, everybody remaining who gets to divide up those acorns, not a single one of them is going to agree with the others on how that should be, on how that should go, regardless of whether it goes into the public trust or gets divided amongst, 7 siblings. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Nobody's going to agree. And with a high enough amount of acorns, the public's going to have their own opinion about who this guy was, how his acorns should get split up, how he came by all of them anyway, and what kind of a human he was. None of it matters. Enjoy the ride.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair, right? The abundance, the financial, material abundance, in my counsel with individuals who achieved a material amount of measurable financial reward, would give it all up for, the physical health required to enjoy it, right? At that point, once your body starts to break down and you really feel betrayed at that point by things outside of your control, even beyond you've done everything right? You've supported your community, you've lived in a way that's aligned, and you still enjoyed economic value. You've been ate healthy, you exercise, and you still end up with something outside of your control.
Sure.
That robs you of the physical capability to be present on this planet in a disease and pain-free fashion, and the financial reward just doesn't matter.
So living in a dynamic, joyful, and present way, maybe at the expense of a year-over-year massive growth, right? Living in an intentional way. How do you want to live? Fuck what you're putting aside. How do you want to live? If today's all you get, right? and tomorrow you get to look back and go, I wish I'd have done today differently. If tomorrow's your last day,
What did you wish you had done today?
what would you have wished you had done today? And when you hit 70, and and I know that there's 70 and 80-year-olds who are built out of like steel cable and
Yep.
right,
Yeah.
I know those guys. I know.
No, my dad golfs his age. Like he's in his 80s and still like productively running around causing trouble. Like he's my idol.
Right.
Yeah.
And by contrast, my dad worked hard for 50 years. He was an engineer at NASA and spent his entire career, like doing that and providing for 4 kids. And we all thrived and he took great care of us, retired and was gone in 18 months. Right. Cause he had done everything right. He had the 401k and he'd set it all aside. Him and my mom never went on these big vacations or spent lavishly because they were going to retire and then go do this thing. And when it was time for my dad to retire, my mom wasn't ready for it. And 18 months later, my dad was gone. And I wonder, and as much as I appreciate how he raised me, I wonder if maybe he could have left a little bit less behind and I could have had a little bit more of my dad.
Yeah. I mean, there's a tough calculus, right? Where you're sacrificing today for tomorrow, right? Resources that you've earned that you don't spend, you set it aside in such a fashion where you have resources in the future. And how do you balance or discount that future, right? And how much?
Because you're betting against an uncertain future.
Yeah. And you don't want to underfund your future in a fashion that you screw yourself, right? Where you have created instability and fragility in your life that, we could look at and predict, right? And how do you balance the today versus the tomorrow, value experience, right? Because, there is that sense that, the reverse, right? I'm sacrificing from today for that future experience. And, there are opportunities to experience safety and value and impact yourself and your community by, setting resources aside that you're entitled to spend and experience today. And, so what's that trade-off, right? I need to save for retirement, but I'd like to have a better bathroom.
Right. Or see Iceland.
Right. And what's the appropriate trade-off there? Because it's wonky. If I'm 65 today, or 67, let's say I'm 67 years old today, I have the ability to turn on Social Security, right? An income stream, a virtually guaranteed income stream. But if I wait to 70, that income stream is almost 25% higher permanently and forever. And so there's a crossover where it's better for you to wait. And the crossover most of the time is your mid-80s. If you live beyond your mid-80s, it was better off waiting. If you died before your mid-80s, it wasn't a good deal. The data would suggest that most of us are going to have a pretty good chance of living beyond our 80s. Like from a math perspective.
For sure.
You should wait. For some people, that's a tough.
Right.
I may not get there. It may not be there for me. The world's going to change. Like there's lots of reasons to say I want it now.
And you and I both have
later.
to navigate California freeways. I mean, that's like, let's take everything that we've done, everything we have control of, off the table.
Yes.
So I fear that we're no closer to the answer than when we began this conversation.
No.
But I think it's an important conversation to have.
There are links, right? Flow state is present in helping to puzzle through the link between health and wealth. And you can't enter into flow state to be productive from a wealth creation standpoint if your health sucks.
Right.
The chassis won't support it.
Right.
So there's definitely links there. And I think parsing
flow state's expensive. It's physically expensive.
Yeah, I think that's right. Awesome. Well, I guess we'll continue to puzzle on.
What a cool one. Always good to talk to you, brother. I love you. There you go.
There it is.
Thanks for listening to the Flow of Money podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about John and Dave at theflowofmoneypodcast.com. If you liked this episode, share it with someone who's ready to step into flow. If you're interested in sponsorship or collaboration, we'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Hey, before you go, this is John O'Day here for the quick note. I am affiliated with Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. And my investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. Dave Gieselman, my partner, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions are mine and Dave's. These opinions are not necessarily those of Raymond James. Every investor situation is unique, and you should consider your investment goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon before making any investment decisions. Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor Raymond James Financial Advisors render any tax advice. Tax matters should be discussed with your tax advisor. This podcast is for investor education purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment advice. Consult your investment advisor before making investment decisions.